What do the internationalists would want money to look like? And what should we be aware of?
Well, there's one thing that they really want in the worst possible way that they didn't get. And that is they would like to see a single global currency being manufactured by a single global central bank. Okay? We know this is true because that is what they tried to do at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. It's held in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, which is at a resort hotel called the Mount Washington Hotel. And a bunch of global dignitaries led by America's Harry Dexter White, Assistant Secretary of State.
Which was a commie, wasn't he a commie?
Yeah, sure. He
That's
was.
relevant. Go on.
He was a communist agent. But anyway, who wasn't back in those days, or today for that matter? And leading the British delegation was the economist John Maynard Keynes, who's probably familiar to most of our listeners, at least in name. Okay. Now, Keynes was the guy, was the real mover and shaker. He was sort of the James Madison, if you will, of this particular thing. He was the guy that had it all planned out the same way James Madison pretty much planned out how he wanted the Constitutional Convention to go under very different circumstances and for very different motives. Keynes came to Bretton Woods prepared with an entire agenda. And being an economist and having mastered all of these arcana that we've been talking about for the last however long we've been talking about them.
I think it's 50 minutes.
50 minutes, okay. All right, well, anyway, he was planning, and a large part of his plan was to not only to make, well, I mean, let me back up just a little bit. So during the Great Depression, the decade or so preceding World War II, pretty much all of the Western countries had gone off the gold standard from about circa 1915 to 1935-ish, okay? And with the exception of Switzerland and a couple other countries. I think Canada was actually last. It was later than the United States. And Switzerland remained on the gold standard. Anyway, and as a result of this, because there was no longer an international gold standard or anything like this against which their currencies could be valued, they began playing games with the relative exchange values of currencies to achieve political objectives. These were called beggar thy neighbor policies, because you can do this when your currency is no longer tethered to gold.
Yes.
And I mean, prior to that time in the gold standard, the franc, the lira, the mark, the dollar, the pound were all just different designations of amounts of gold.
Right.
So you couldn't do that. But when gold was taken out of the picture, you could play these games. Okay, and so Keynes' response to this, the chaos, the so-called currency wars of the 1930s and the lead up to World War II, was to say at Bretton Woods, well, he didn't say, well, let's bring back the gold standard. What he did say was, let's get rid of all these different currencies and have one global fiat currency. We're going to call, he had a name for it, the Bancor, which comes from the French words banque and or means gold, ironically enough, okay? And let's have them issued by a single global central bank modeled after the Bank of England or the American Federal Reserve or something like that, and there will no longer be any dollars or pounds. Because of lingering sovereignty, national pride, the countries, particularly the United States, said, no way, that's a non-starter. So the backup position was, okay, well, forget about that then. What we'll do instead is we'll make the dollar the reserve currency of the world. And that made the rest of the world, and we'll tether all the other currencies in effect to the dollar. And we'll tether the dollar very tenuously to gold. And I won't go into all of that, but suffice it to say that was the compromise position. So we retained this system of sort of international chaos, all these different fiat currencies. They had an organization called the Bank of International Settlements, which was set up in the 1930s, actually, to help try to mitigate this problem. And that's what we have to this day. And so the goal, the long-term goal, is very simple. They want a single global currency, a single global central bank, international central bank, presumably allied to the UN system, that would be the emitter of said currency. And that would be a single global source of global inflation and global enrichment of global elites at the expense of all the rest of us.